Well, good morning. It is February the 19th of 2026, and you're with PJ's podcast with Pastor Joel Rice. And I just discovered just a cool little verse as I was doing my readings in the mornings. I started out, by the way, just as a side note, reading Proverbs like one of my pastor friends had started doing years and years ago. And there's 31 Proverbs, and so if you read one every day of the month, one chapter, and you keep doing that, it slowly starts to sink in. And I'm not any wiser, but I know more information. So with that, anyway, I started this habit, and it's been a really amazing journey. But in the process, as I started thinking about wisdom and fearing the Lord and things like that, that's talked about all over the place in Proverbs, I decided I better know Jesus better. So I started reading a gospel, because most of them are, 26, 28, 21, 13 chapters, 16 chapters. Anyway, the point is that by doing it, I can read and read all of these things. And so now I'm reading 5 books of the Bible, a chapter a day. And it takes me a bit, but that beginning thing started me into reading. Well, I happened to be reading as one of those books, the book of Exodus. And I decided I was just going to read a chapter and spread it over 2 months, but I'm into the habit well enough I can do this. And well, I'm in chapter 16 a few days ago, and something hit me. They're freshly out of Egypt. The Egyptians have drowned in the Red Sea. God is leading them with a pillar of clouds and a pillar of fire. They've been through the plagues and all of this stuff, and they're out in the wilderness, and they've already, instead of inquiring of God is the word I was going for, and saying, "Hey Lord, we're struggling, we're running low on water. What can you do?" They gripe about it, which is our human tendency, but it does show our lack of faith. And they had lots of that, but they were also just freshly introduced to God. Honestly, they were just freshly introduced to the original God. Some of them knew of Him and knew Him, but most of them were chasing after all these, Egyptian gods and other stuff. So anyway, long story short, they've been through all this. God has turned bitter water into fresh water. And they're getting farther out in the desert, and the bread is finally running out. The bread that didn't have a time to leaven and raise. That's why they ate the unleavened bread for, in the feast, to remember that, was starting to run out. And they're like, what are we going to do? There's no food out here. In Nile, you could fish or catch crocodiles or whatever. You could eat a whole bunch of different things. But raise cucumbers, there's lots of wheat. So what are we going to do? And again, they start grumbling about it. And Moses appeals to the Lord. And in verse 4, I want to read this to you very clearly out of the ESV. Then the Lord said, Yahweh said to Moses, "Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not." Now, that's an interesting thing. I'm thinking, you're thinking, well, He just provided bread from heaven, but I've never remembered this particular verse, that there was a test in it. Like He was going to use this to test whether or not they were going to obey His law. Let's put this in a higher level. You have to remember that God's law is part of the statutes within the covenant that He was going to make with them. Now, God's law is God's law. It was there before He gave them gave it to the people. All of the things in God's law already existed. We were created in God's image, and we know these things intrinsically. And when we ate of the tree, it was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, not just evil, right? We're not totally deprived. We still have the knowledge of what is good in there. So knowing these things and having an understanding of what God is calling us into, and he says, I want to test them just to see if they're going to listen to me. Now, here's the biggest thing. And I'm going through, you know, the I Am series, I Am Love series, which is covering the Ten Commandments. But we forget that when we don't listen to God, even on the most basic thing, we're breaking the law. We're sinning. If we're out doing something that's outside of God's will and design, we're sinning. It doesn't matter if it's legal or not in the United States. It doesn't matter if you know, like for instance, not having God as the first and foremost thing in our life is sinning because it's God's will. It's also what's best for us, but we you know, we don't even go into that. But do you understand that? Jesus called out his mother and his brothers for not doing the will of God because they didn't believe in what he was teaching. There's a problem, isn't there? You know, I think about all of these things and I'm going, people, right? He gave them manna to see if they would actually listen, obey, trust him, which is another way of saying have faith. Faith and trust are the same word. If you believe somebody, you listen to them, right? If you trust somebody, you listen to them. I don't care to use the word belief and faith anymore. I like the word trust, because if you trust somebody, you listen to them. Well, with that in mind, he describes what to do. He says, gather enough for one day for each member of the family, and he even gives a size, like a ofar or something. I don't know what it's called. A bucket. Okay, we'll call it a bucket, because I don't know the measurements from the Hebrew. And for each person in the house, and that's it. Don't save any till the next day, except for on Friday, I want you to gather 2 buckets so that you have food for the next day. And what do the people do? There's a few who test it. They gather more than they're supposed to, and the next day what was left over is all maggoty and gross and nasty. And then other people don't gather enough for 2 days on Friday, and so they go out on Saturday to look for food, and there's none. Okay, but the people who did gather 2, double the amount, it didn't get maggoty the next day because that was God's will. And so here is God setting up a visual thing of how to trust him, specifically using the Sabbath day law, and that he's going to provide for them. He's testing us. So let's apply that to so many aspects of our life. Because he also gave a Sabbath rest for the land. Every 7 years, they were supposed to let the land rest. And if you did that, your crop on the 6th year would be so big, you'd be eating it to the 9th year. You'd be still taking in new crops on the 8th year, but you'd also be still eating it from the 6th year. 3 years later, you'll still be eating from the last year that you harvested before the Sabbath year, that you'd have so much food that he made a promise, right? And here's the thing, they never kept it. They never let the land rest all that time. And when they were in captivity in Babylon, it was set because they never obeyed that law and letting the land rest. 70 years they spent in captivity. That's 70 times 7. So 490 years, they did not listen to God and let the land rest and give it the Sabbath rest that it needed. And he put them out for those 70 years. He let the land catch up. Now, how do we apply that today? What are we talking about here? So the question is, which I already talked about on a sermon review, so I'm not going to go back into the Sabbath itself. But I am going to talk about it for just a second, is that if we never take time out for God and in that relationship and trusting him through that, do we have a relationship with God? Well, no. No, if we think we have to work 7 days a week to pay the bills, then there's a problem. Specifically 7 days a week and a time to gather with the Lord, there's a problem. I mean, the corporate USA has become that exact thing, that they have to work 24/7 to make profit. And it's like, there's a problem with that thinking. There's no trust in the Lord in that. There's no letting people actually rest and having a life. I truly believe in no graveyards. Truly. And at least one day that they're closed, or at least a half day, and you would actually see your productivity come up. That's just my belief. Why? Because I trust God. I trust God. That's why. I trust God, and you don't. You don't trust God, and it's all about money. It's all about profit. It's all about security. It's all about having more and more and more and more, and it's never going to be enough. Trust God. We do the same thing with our money and our tithe and our offerings. We won't support our local church. We don't give to people around because we're strapped. And yes, the economy of the United States has gone to the toilet. Seriously, if you haven't wedged yourself into a house in your 20s and figured out a way to get it paid off, or take that profit and make, buy other houses and stuff, but slowly but surely get it paid off by the time you're retired, you're in a bad spot. And that stinks. And maybe you never had that chance. Maybe you never made enough money with your family situation or whatever. And now, but I only take home this, and so I don't have any room to give. Well, that's not what Scripture says. It talks about the widow's mite. It talks about, I know there was times in my life I was destitute. But God always fed me. God always took care of me. So do I trust him? Well, I do. Why should this person who does make good money, I'm not depriving them of their gift, have to support everything that goes on at my church, the church that has supported me before I became a pastor. I'm talking about the church in general, right? There's been things that the church has done that helped my mom and I when I was a kid I didn't even know about, and there was other times. And here's the point. Do I trust them? Well, yeah, I'm going to have to. They're imperfect people, but God knows. And God has sent people to me over and over again and has helped me in so many different ways. And the list goes on. So do I trust him? Well, I do. Well, then why aren't we given time and money and energy and to the relationship and to his people and to his community? And well, come on, people. I know there's issues with any group of people, and I know that the church has become a byword to some because it's organized religion, and there are some people who have become more organized than they are Christian. I get that, but that doesn't mean that the church as a whole is dead, nor that this imperfect church here is dead, or a whole bunch of them all over this country. Man, I've visited back east and other places, and I found little churches tucked away that are of slightly different theological views than my own, who are such beautiful believers in Jesus, who are living out their faith anyway. Okay, so be it. What I did. I gave money to those churches. I trusted in those churches. I believe in those churches. I believe that there's going to be people that are going to pick up that mantle and continue those churches. And I believe that people should support those churches and not just look for handouts from the churches. Because we are the church. And we're to work hard with these hands. And God is testing us. Will we trust him? Because in the end, that's it. Will we trust him? You know, if you're struggling with food and you don't have any property, have you ever asked a neighbor if you could grow a garden on their property if they're not using it? Have you ever talked to the city about, starting a community garden because you're struggling with food and I figured somebody else could be helped by it too? Okay, you're retired. Let's stop doing this and let's start trusting the Lord and start using what we have for his glory and to support the people that bear his image. He's testing us in everything. Are we going to be so self-focused? Well, I don't have this and I don't have this and blah, 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 blah. Well, is that what God created us for, is to have the latest iPhone? Now, by the way, I bought the cheapest Android version phone we could find because I don't care. In fact, I didn't even want a screen phone. I wanted a flip phone. But since I couldn't do certain things, specifically talk and text and stuff like that, I gave in finally to my wife's desires. And so I got one. And I used it, and I still have it. And I can still use it still. But the Lord blessed me with a really high-end iPhone. And I use it to make videos and other stuff, and I'm using it as a tool. But it was given to me. The Lord blessed me. I'm just going to have to trust him. I'm going to be about his business and trust him. And so many other things. I drive a 98 Dodge that is complete pile right now. I'm waiting for the motor to give up the ghost, and yet it keeps running. And I know I'm going to have to work on it. So I bought a ugly Eurovan from 1993 that runs great. And I had to put some work with these things and some money into it, but I don't make a payment. And it's going to be great. And so when I need to work on the truck, I can just, when I get the money together, cash, I'm working on getting out of debt, got my own issues right, I'm going to have to trust him. And if it doesn't work out, great. But they're serving. Will we trust him? There's a test everywhere. The Lord sent the manna to actually test them, not just to feed them. He never actually talks about feeding them first. He talks about testing them. I will provide so that I might test them to see if they'll obey my will. How about you? How you doing? May the Lord bless you as you walk through his tests and his burdens this week. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. This has been PJ's Podcast with Pastor Joel Rice. We'll see you next time.